I got blue pilled in the sense that he brought me back from the edge of the Rogan verse.
Oh, so you don't mean you're like a total like communist liberal now?
No, I just mean
All right, that's better. I thought you were saying he showed me all these crazy lefty ideas, and I'm like totally bought in.
no, nothing to do with lefty. More about to do with basically everything we talk about on this podcast, which is like the Joe Rogan extended universe, and sort of giving me a really interesting perspective of all the haters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So he's a hater of Joe Rogan.
he's a big
Critic,
hater. He's
a
a
big
big hater. So he's this friend of mine is. I hope he's listening to this because I'm going to be very complimentary. He's one of the smartest people I know, one of the most independent thinkers, and one of the most like he's not at all like mainstream. I love CNN. Like
Is he a physician?
Is he a physician?
Is he a doctor?
Yeah, he's a doctor.
Okay, I just wanted to know who we're talking
Yeah,
about.
no,
without naming him.
yeah, no, you know who we're talking about. But he's
If I do this,
he was very like up on Occupy Wall Street before it was like he was the first person I remember I was living with.
he's actually knowledgeable. I get it.
He's very but not only that, like I was living when Occupy Wall Street was going on. I was like very much in the startup world, living with people like doing finance. I was very much like, oh, these like dirty hippies in Zuccotti Park are like are crazy, and he was the one who was like, they're not so crazy. They actually have like a really interesting point. Like, and he also at that point like turned me around like, oh, like so he's coming from that world of like he doesn't just digest everything the New York Times tells him to digest.
Not just
like,
spit back of the talking.
Not
points.
at all. He's not at all.
Fair enough.
Very
Let's give
smart.
it credit.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you something, and then you're going to continue. Okay. This is interesting because, from my perspective, where I sit now, it's very confusing to me how Joe Rogan can have detractors with such strong opinions to the extent that he does. And now you're going to make the case as to why.
So also I was sitting there and like I found myself he has this good line that he says where he says like when he's with his family at home, he's like the most pro-Palestinian person in the world. When he's with like his wife's friends, he's like the most pro-Israel person in the room. Like like he shifts between like the crowd. So I was sitting with him. I was like backing up Joe Rogan like crazy, like defending him wholeheartedly. And now I'm going to be here like tearing him down wholeheartedly. So like I'm not necessarily like anywhere. But like I don't want to.
They're
like,
both true. You're just going to.
I don't want to debate with you. I just want to let you know what he was saying.
Fine.
So he was saying.
I'm actually interested because I want to hear an illuminated perspective on what is the big deal with. I'll make the case as to. And then I want to hear it because I think it's important just to elaborate. First, I'll lay it out, and I know you kind of know where I stand on this because we sort of once stood on this, and now you're blue-pilled. So fuck that. But the idea to me is this pushback Joe Rogan gets seemingly comes from people who probably don't really watch the show. And the reason and I think a lot of it is spit back, people who have just taken caricatures of him, little sound bites, and have formed this caricature of Joe Rogan and this idea of him that isn't him, and they're not really giving it a fair shot. And if they even did a tiny bit, they would realize what you're watching when you watch Joe Rogan is a conversation. Not somebody preaching opinions even necessarily, and not somebody telling you the truth all the time in the sense that they know what's right, but someone at least attempting to find out what's true. And sometimes you're going to ask wrong questions, and sometimes you're going to come to wrong conclusions. But the whole show is based in the context of conversation. I'm talking to interesting people, and I'm asking the questions that I possess to try to arrive at a better understanding of things. Right. How on earth can that ever be controversial?
So his whole point was that I'm extending a courtesy to him that in any other aspect would be sort of like absurd. Where he's like, so it all started basically where I was like, you're a doctor. Like, what do you think of these doctors Joe Rogan has had on his thing? And he was like, I haven't listened to any of them, but I actually think Joe Rogan's like I think like he's actually responsible for like a lot of people dying, and like this whole anti-vax thing is like insane. And so then I went into like, well,
Pushback.
these doctors are highly critical, all that. And I mean, I don't want to. We can go into point by point, really, because it is interesting.
I
but,
do want to
but,
understand
yeah.
what you understood.
No, but generally, he just applying the same critical thinking and reasoning we apply to everyone else, where he's basically like, when Anderson Cooper gets to a desk and says something like the Wuhan flu, the Wuhan lab leak is a conspiracy theory, and anyone who says that is a crackpot, like the amount that he directly benefits from that is fairly limited. Because he gets a salary, and like all the people in that organization get salaries, and they make money, but then we sort of extrapolate it to be like, oh no, they're all benefiting from shutting down this conversation, et cetera, et cetera. Just everything we all say about mainstream media, which he agrees with, by the way, like completely. When it comes to Joe Rogan,
so he's not saying he trusts them and their character.
No,
Joe Rogan. This is his own independent critique.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not saying
for the folks.
He's not saying mainstream media, CNN, cable
has
news,
it right.
all that has it right. He's saying like for sure they don't. He's like Fox News is an entertainment company. Like literally on paper they're an entertainment. That's how they protect themselves against lawsuits. So he's like they are not the answer. But at the same time, when a guy sits at a desk and he's directly making he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars in his pocket. For every episode. And the guys sitting across from him, like Malone and McCullough, they also have a lot to directly gain from these episodes. For some reason, we just take it as at face value, like, oh, they're just having a conversation. So his point was sort of like, as someone who's never listened to Joe Rogan and just looks at it objectively, he's like, here's a guy who's making millions and millions and millions of dollars because he found an audience. And the more he gives this audience what they want to hear, the more money he makes. And for some reason, we're just not critical of that guy. He's a nice guy. He has good intentions. Like they do it at CNN, but Joe Rogan doesn't do it. He's the good guy. And I'm just like, yeah, that's a fair point. Like you're right. I don't know him at all. The same way like we're getting comments on like people don't know us at all. I don't know him at all. I'm sure he is a very, very nice guy. He could be this like very cutthroat business guy who is like, yeah, man, there's 50 million people who want to hear the anti-vax argument. I'm gonna give it to them, and I want to make a lot of money, and like I'm not doing anything wrong, and like I'm just having a conversation, but like, and I'm like, yeah, that's a fair perspective to have, like he is directly benefiting from giving this audience what they want to hear. No, and then I'm like, no, but I'm like, but he doesn't do that because like, his whole thing is he just wants to learn. He's just curious, and like it all started in the basement. He's been doing it the same way, and he's like, dude. I'm listening to myself talk, and I'm like, I sound fairly naive when I'm sitting here defending Joe Rogan's intentions. Like I just do. I feel like I sound naive. When I'm saying this,
you let me know when I can respond, and I will.
And because I know what the response is because it's the response that I gave for the most part. I mean, he was.
There's something so fundamentally flawed with that assessment. What he did to you, not intentionally, but he pushed a button in you that flipped your MO on itself because you're generally skeptical of power and incentives, especially profit. You are personally.
But he is.
And you were like, so I apply that same standard to Joe Rogan as I do anyone else who's benefiting from so much money.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Because what's happening on Joe Rogan and the reason he's worth all that money is because people responded to what he was doing in the first place. His honest conversations with people became popular and therefore made him more valuable and made him worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Spotify. He didn't put that on to make this money per se. What he did, people responded to for a very particular reason. That reason being, this is an alternative to this mainstream media. And what's different about it? It's not edited. It's not contrived. It's 4 hours long of unscripted conversation. You can't fake that. There's no trickery going on here. Listen, and he's saying I haven't even watched. So sure, there's a lot of money, but this idea that we should be skeptical of money is a reflection of value in this particular sense, especially. There's nothing corrupting about it in the sense that the money that he's making is because we, the audience, is rewarding him for giving us something so valuable to us, which is unscripted, honest conversation with everybody of all stripes. The guy's had communist, crazy Marxists on. He's had right-wingers on, left-wingers, entertainers,
Right.
rock
So
stars.
specifically with the vaccine, I mean, so then we got specifically into the vaccine. His first point was that
So I'm saying just assessing, oh, look, this guy's making a lot of money. He must be compromised. I can't buy that. That's not...
I think compromise is too
Or disingenuous.
No, I think he is vulnerable to the same sort of traps that anybody in his position would be, which is...
But isn't there a point? Yeah.
Which is when you find something that's working, you want to keep doing it.
Understood.
Yeah.
Everybody has this notion of, oh, you get the lure of, wow, this is really working. I'm going to sort of copy what works and forget the authenticity. However, when you watch the show and listen to the conversations,
so
any any person with ability to critically think and assess can say for them can decide for themselves. Did what I just listened to seem honest and genuine or not?
So
he's not like pulling something over it. Pulling something over our heads.
Something my friend brought up, which Joe Rogan brought up in his response to this whole controversy now on Spotify, which is I mean, I explained the people that were on the show, and he's like, did he have any pro-vaccine people on? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, he had like Sanjay Gupta, but he didn't. And he's like, did he push these McCullough and Malone as hard as he pushed Sanjay Gupta? And I was like, no, he didn't.
No, because Sanjay Gupta did a horrible job.
But either way, I mean, wait, Joe Rogan.
He gave Sanjay Gupta 3 hours, and Sanjay Gupta said, "I've never spoken to anybody for that long."
He addressed it in saying, if I have someone like Malone on, I should also follow that up with someone on the other side of the conversation. Crystal and Cigar had a segment 30.
I'm saying that would be useful. I agree that would be useful, but okay,
so,
that doesn't mean he's not genuine.
Yeah.
And you made this point a few podcasts or on the last episode where you said, if the other mainstream outlets would have these people on too, you wouldn't need Joe Rogan to be the only space where it could happen.
Totally.
I'm deep blue pilling you, and I can see it.
No, I don't. So I don't want to debate. I don't want to debate about it because I agree with you.
I know. I'm not debating you. I'm debating the point that he's making, being channeled through your weak, biased self. No, you're channeling a good argument in a sense that I understand that. But watch the episodes. There's no secret here.
So
there's no secret.
But if you watch the episode and you go point by point by these doctors were not. I mean, so Crystal Cigar did a 30-minute segment with this like Stanford PhD practicing doctor who it seems like he was family friends with Cigar in some capacity. Like they seem like they know him pretty well and they trust him. And his specialty is basically like studying like medical studies and like the statistics they use. Yeah. So he was going through I think Malone's points mostly, sort of point.
Bald guy?
No, not bald guy.
There was a guy who took apart Peter McCullough's episode in the fairest way.
Yeah, so
he's this bald guy. I think he's a doctor, but anyway.
No, but same idea. They did have ours. I mean, and he basically tore a lot of what Malone was saying down. It seems like someone could do that with McCullough too. And what Mark was saying also is like, as credentialed as these guys seem to a layperson, he's like in the medical field. They're not well respected. I mean, he said like the ivermectin guys, especially. He's like whatever organization they said they like represent is not like a well known, well respected.
I've seen those response videos too.
Which was really interesting, and which is something like I was like I didn't hear that from Joe Rogan. Like
yeah, but how would he know?
He could talk to a doctor.
What do you mean?
My friend told me this. Why didn't Joe Rogan ask around like these guys are coming on the show? What's the deal with their organization?
But Joe Rogan has pushed back when he feels he has to push back. Like he's not afraid to push back on people. Yeah, I've seen it happen.
It seems like he has.
He had a guest on a week after Malone, a journalist from Australia. I forget his name, Zepp something. I'm mispronouncing the name. Where Joe Rogan was like, "And what about these issues of myocarditis?" And Joe's like, "Yeah, Jeb, myocarditis. You know, your risk for the vaccine goes up substantially." It's like, yeah, but you're aware that, like, you know, your risk is 10 times more likely for myocarditis
with COVID. Yeah.
And there's this moment, and everyone thought Joe Rogan gets owned, but it's not owned. He's just like, oh, that's an interesting point. We don't know where that comes from. In the moment, he's not going to just change his mind. Right. But he has a guy on who disagrees with him, and they're buds, and they get along.
Yeah.
So I'm saying he's not trickery. Like, he has a guy on. Great. If Fauci wanted to go on Joe Rogan, would Joe Rogan say, no, I don't want you on?
No,
Fauci
it
has
would be
every
great. It would
opportunity.
be-
It's so
yeah.
easy to criticize from the press secretary and say what you want, how Joe Rogan is dangerous. The response to Joe Rogan is all you need to know over who's right and wrong in this situation. The response to Joe Rogan isn't, here's why Joe Rogan is wrong, point by point.
Right.
I'm gonna go on the show and we'll talk to Joe and I'll explain why droplets are dangerous. If they were brave enough and if their points were sound enough, you could easily debate these. Instead, they're running in fear and trying to shut
They
down
don't
the
want to have a long conversation with anybody.
They're trying to shut down the conversation, which tells you who the honest players are in this game.
What Neil Young, I think, should have done was release a special with Neil Young where he sits down with a pro-vax person and has this amazing special.
So we can segment
Who wouldn't
into
listen
that?
to that? That would be amazing.
I want to segment into that part of the conversation because that's a huge
Fine,
topic. But let's wrap this up.
Before we go back,
Button this up.
I do think
Because
I do think it's here. Well, here's what I want to button the whole thing up with.
Yeah.
We're gonna live long enough to see all these up and coming rabble rousers, Crystal Cigar, Joe Rogan, Tim Dillon, Anthony Schultz, like all of them. We're gonna live long enough to see them become the man.
Andrew Schultz.
And what I say?
Anthony.
I'm talking about his. You don't know Anthony Schultz.
Oh.
He's like, no, I'm just joking. Andrew Schultz. I think we're gonna live long enough to see all of them become the establishment, and then get swept and get like swept under from.
But
beneath.
before the establishment, do you think they're going to become vindicated? I think so.
I think so.
The tide is turning towards. It's so obvious that even people who were all about COVID restrictions are now just saying no. This is ridiculous. I call your bluff.
I mean, his point was so good on the video, but he's like, it was heresy to say that with the vaccine you could still catch COVID.
So what would this mutual friend of ours, who's very smart, say to those things? How can Joe Rogan be his boogeyman or his subject of criticism when there's so much more malfeasance going on the opposite side?
I think he would say they're not mutually exclusive. But I also just, the only thing I really want to take away from it is just that I think that there is a point where you have to see someone like Joe Rogan and someone with a platform as powerful as he is, as more than just some guy in his studio having fun conversations. And you just have to think about it critically at a certain point of like he's a very powerful force, and with that doesn't necessarily come responsibility, but we have to think about it critically.
Yes.
That's
here's why you're not actually blue-pilled. You ready? Because Joe Rogan's audience likes the fact that his show demands that you think critically. When you watch Joe Rogan episodes, he's sort of representing for us at large as the critical thinker in the room to ask questions from somebody who has authority, because Joe Rogan's whole premise is I'm a fucking idiot. I just have questions.
Right.
So, and it's not some act. He's like, I have questions and I like talking to interesting people. And that's why his podcast grew, because people watch it and then they start thinking.
But that whole attitude,
as opposed to mainstream media, which is like, you don't have to think. Here are the answers.
Yeah, I hear it. It's the reason I like the show.
And like you're talking to a person who's making this analysis and hasn't watched Joe Rogan.
But
how absurd! How absurd!
I am thinking of him, and I'm also thinking about Chris. I'm thinking about all these things a little bit more. I'm giving them less of a benefit of a doubt.
Granted, they're not all impervious to the corruption they're critiquing and criticizing.
Yes.
But that's saying everybody's human. That's not a profound point.
But I mean, I think it is profound, because basically right now, to Joe Rogan fans, Joe Rogan can do no wrong. Like, I mean, he really can do no wrong. What could he do? Well, what could he do that would make people not trust him? I thought of something. Mark. Well, maybe we'll bleep that out. Yeah. The guy, our friend. It doesn't. I don't think it matters.
Just don't say the last name.
It doesn't matter. The guy, my friend who was talking to, was convinced that
I thought it was Danny.
That he took the vaccine. And I was saying, if it came out that Joe Rogan took the vaccine,
then he would be lied about it,
that would be a huge deal to his fans.
Of course, it
that
would.
He lied, not that he took the vaccine. That he lied.
That he lied, because he's very honest, and that's what he strives to be.
So
very, very honest.
At the same,
in what he knows and doesn't know, and what questions he has. I'm just saying, watch the content, judge for yourself.
Totally,
it's so ironic.
Yeah.
With all due respect to this friend who I respect, it's very ironic that his critique would be that we're all just unconditionally praising him and not thinking critically, but he hasn't watched the episodes to assess.
But I think you can only can only have that objectivity without becoming a fan.
Just to say, here's making a valid point, which is don't take everything you hear at face value. There's always another side to it, as genuine as it seems on the show.
I don't think that's his point. I think his point is don't take everybody at face value. Don't take Malone at face value, and don't take Joe Rogan at face value, that they both have the best intentions.
Yeah, but like, you'd have to have in order to suspect bad intentions, I don't think it's enough to say, well, it's a chicken and egg thing.
Not bad intentions, human intentions. Greed, and profit.
Once you make so much money, doesn't it free you from caring? When you have fuck you money, who cares?
I mean, to some people it doesn't. Some people it doesn't.
But the thing is, what makes Joe Rogan, in a sense, foolproof is that the support unconditionally from his fans relies on him being honest.
That's the narrative.
It's not the narrative. It's the reason he's popular. Don't you think? Why do you think people love it so much? It's finally given you this opportunity to hear people unscripted talk.
Within that context, though, he can have someone on who's not quite as credentialed as he's saying they are.
Maybe, but he's also open to having...
And not quite as straightforward about what they really want.
Yes, and there have been guests that have come on, and then he doesn't have...
That's the little space that he's working in.
I'm just saying, you won't see Joe Rogan clips. You won't see Joe Rogan misrepresenting anything. He posts the entire episode unedited and unscripted.
I'm not talking about misrepresenting, but he can misrepresent an issue by showing only the side he's curious in, which is totally valid.
You can only know what you're curious about, because you can only know what you know.
Totally, but it becomes problematic.
Look at his response video.
It becomes
He didn't say "fuck all you guys." He said, "It's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to have other people on." And you think that's suspect?
So the one thing about his response video, which I didn't like, I want to say the first thing first, which is it's okay to do. When a show reaches 11 million listeners an episode, that it's not the same thing as it was when you were sitting with your buddies in a basement smoking pot. It just isn't. And you can either say, "Not my problem." I have no responsibility to do anything. It's kind of like what Jon Stewart did on The Daily Show. Like, I'm my lead-in is a puppet show making crank calls. Not my problem. It's 11 million shows. You guys deal with it. I'm just doing me. Or you can say, this thing that I do is not the same thing that it was, and I'm going to grapple with that. He's not grappling with it, which he has no responsibility to do, but it's a thing that he's not dealing with.
Michael. I speak ill of King Rogan.
The second thing. What
I'm saying is, I think that is the best strategy he can do.
Sure.
What else is it for him to do? To say,
and he has a different
huge
opinion.
now. He makes such a concerted effort to not pedestal himself and buy into his own reach, because if he does that, then he becomes compromised.
It may be that you can only do this show without running into serious problems until you get so big, and then you have to stop.
Why do you think, though? Like, he's like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Talking to who I want to talk to.
He can.
There's nothing irresponsible about that. Clearly, people like it.
He can, but there's when Neil Young is taking his music off Spotify because of an episode you did. It's not. You're just sort of like you're not quite reconciling what exactly this thing is anymore. But anyway, I want to in the response video. The story he gave about Neil Young, where he was a security guard, he was getting paid $18 an hour, and when this fight broke out, he was just like, "Fuck it, I'm putting my hood on and leaving." I thought it was the worst example, because basically he was saying, "I don't care what my responsibilities are. I don't care what job I signed up for. If I don't want to do this anymore, fuck it. If it's not working for me, fuck it. I'm just gonna walk away."
You read too much into that. I think he was trying to connect.
I know, it's such a weird story to give, though. I get it. He was trying to connect to Neil Young, but like, what a bad example.
Interesting. Didn't bother me that much.
I'm gonna put my hood up and walk away if I don't feel like taking responsibility.
He was probably. I think it was a light story, not a heavy story. And I hear what you're saying. There's irony in the fact that I'm just walking away from my responsibility.
Yeah.
But more important than that, the response I thought was, "Yeah, I'm a super fan. Sure, full disclosure. I love what he's about and what he does."
So am I, by the way.
Yeah, not anymore. You're off, Michael. You're off it. And I know you are, but what do you think, first of all, of my response? Is it exactly what you were thinking?
It's exactly what I said to Mark.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I was like, you don't get this guy. You have to listen to the show. He's the good guy.
Oh, so you do agree, but you're just saying he checked your biases a little bit.
He checked my biases.
Checked your confirmation bias. Yeah, fine. Everyone has to do that.
Yeah.
Now come back and stop being a fucking idiot.
I mean, I know people who are super, super cool, and if you look at their social media, like they seem one way, but like like you spend time with them, you went to like high school, college, whatever. Like when you get them alone in the room, like they're not quite the nicest guy in the world. Like they're not quite as like like
Sure. The evidence about Joe Rogan, testimonial after testimonial from personal experiences from people who know him closely and distantly, is always consistent.
totally.
And they have no financial incentive to say it, but nothing but integrity.
They do have
honest-
financial incentive to say it because he puts them on the show and it's great for their careers.
Okay, but people say who are as successful with or without him. People who run the gamut. People who've already been on the show. Yes, they want to be brown nosy, maybe complimentary. You could say that as the worst of intentions, but consistently, you don't get a kind of reputation like that if you're what you're saying. You're not who you seem.
But I don't think
you just don't get.
I don't
that.
think it's mutually exclusive for him. I mean, I said this at the very beginning of like COVID, where I was like, it seems like there's an unserved audience, and he is serving it.
Well,
I don't think that makes you a bad guy.
Of course not. But what you're saying is there could be this other side that we don't know. But I'm just saying that the evidence points from people all over the spectrum and all over the map of fame and power, and from everybody, they've all said very consistently,
he is a very good guy, and he does have the best intentions. I don't think it makes you a bad guy to be like, there's a lot of people who want to hear these interviews and no one's giving it to them, so I'm gonna do it. And like,
are you saying then you don't trust him at his word when he says, I'm interested in these people?
I think he is interested in those people, but I think he also knows. I think he knows what he's doing. I just think he knows what he's doing. I don't think he's just having on Malone because he wants to talk to Malone. I think he knows this is gonna be a big fucking deal, and it's gonna make us a lot of ad dollars.
Yeah, but you can follow the paper trail. Not paper trail is a bad word. You can follow the curiosity trail of Joe Rogan, money aside, all the way from how COVID narrative has been structured and perpetrated onto people. It started with Brett Weinstein, who knew Joe Rogan from other issues that had nothing pre-COVID. Yeah. So he has a credibility with Joe Rogan. Brett Weinstein, I think it started with him. He has social and intellectual credibility with Joe Rogan that predates COVID. So he trusts him. And when he brings up concerns about what's going on, that leads Joe Rogan to say, okay, let me put him on with his guests.
Yeah.
And you can just follow the integrity trail over how this all happened. It wasn't like, the mainstream media has this narrative about COVID. I could really make a lot of ad dollars from having someone with a counter narrative.
It doesn't need to be that extreme. I also think if he were listening right now, he'd say, yeah, you should be critical of me. I have $100 million from Spotify. If you're not critical of me, you're the idiot. Like, sit there, talk about it, figure it out.
But be critical. But I just haven't heard too much. I've heard a lot of like caricaturing, calling him a transphobe and a racist, all this ridiculous criticism.
Right.
I want to hear critiques of Malone's arguments, not of Malone as a crackpot. Tell me what he said that's objectionable. Yeah. Tell me what Joe Rogan's wrong. Rogan's open to being wrong. My point is, you can follow how he got to Malone and McCullough. You can follow it. Yeah. If you follow his guests and his curiosity, it's all there on display in 3 to 4 hour segments. All like, if you just do it and do the work before coming to these conclusions, you'll find that there's really nothing I can say other than what it is here in front of me, honest conversations with interesting people. The evidence points to that more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, but you could say the other way, and that's the way he went, and so that's just
you could. And you'd be wrong, I think, given
if
you're a data-driven person, you want to think rationally and critically. If you follow the evidence, it's all on display for you in the show's content, and if you follow the show's content, that's why I'm confused by a lot of it.